Hello guys! Welcome to the Alrasta channel to discuss and explain the exciting storyline of your favorite series SwallowedStar episode 182. In the previous episode, we saw Luofeng and the Taiwo team engaged in an intense battle. The creatures from the Qiushi clan, who had been defeated earlier, returned, bringing with them powerful creatures from the demon race, some of whom even belonged to the royal family. To secure victory, Luofeng ultimately had to unleash his true power to destroy his enemies using the star-eating plant. After the battle, Luofeng had to part ways with Taiwo's team and would now face the extraterritorial battlefield alone. What will happen next? Alright, without further ado, let's dive into the story. The journey Luofeng will take will be to Misty Sand Island, located not far from the main continent of Yanji. Misty Sand Island has an excellent geographical location, and because the island is shrouded in fog all year round, it is the perfect location for fighters to build their hideouts. As a result, the strategic Misty Sand Island has become a battleground for various races. Compared to the main continent of Yanji, Luofeng is certain that the enemies he will encounter there will be fewer and weaker, making it an ideal stepping stone before entering the main continent. Therefore, Luofeng has decided to make Misty Sand Island his first stop to gather the necessary experience and information. Luofeng then asked Babata to find a place to stay there first. As Luofeng's ship began to enter the continent of Misty Sand Island, Babata, who was sleeping, heard the warning alarm. Excited, Babata immediately informed Luofeng, who was meditating. It was known that when Babata found something very interesting, it meant that it was nearby. Not far from there, among the human troops who were fighting, there was a figure that Luofeng recognized very well, and that was Nolan Shan. Who would have thought that in such a vast space battlefield, Luofeng would encounter his old enemy again? Was this what they called fate? Luofeng still remembered that Nolan Shan had used his family and subordinates to threaten Luofeng and kill Earth's citizens, an event that had occurred approximately 4,000 years ago. After living for so long, Luofeng vowed that today would be the day Nolan Shan met his end. At that moment, a medium-scale battle was raging on the surface between the human legion and the demon race. The demon race, with their larger physical bodies, dominated the course of the battle. However, this did not mean the human side could not put up a meaningful fight. Among the many demon races in the middle of the battlefield, there was one creature that caught Luofeng's attention, and that was a two-headed dragon called the Time-Space Beast. It was one of the 18 royal families of the demon race. That's why in the ongoing war, its mere presence could boost the morale of the demon army. It is known that the Time-Space Beast is extremely powerful. Moreover, its silver eyes can manipulate time, while its golden eyes can manipulate space. And when both are used simultaneously, the power of its domain over space and time is multiplied. That's why, in the ongoing battle, even though the human side unleashed a barrage of attacks toward it, the Time-Space Beast wasn't hit by a single attack. It could dodge them with such ease. In fact, it could also launch direct attacks on the human race with relative ease. The arrival of the Time-Space Beast has become a terrifying threat to the human race, which is now being pushed back. The established battle formation is already beginning to show signs of collapse. Among the warriors busy fighting, we are briefly shown Nolan Shan being charged by a giant mammoth from the demon race. But Nolan does not die, as he receives assistance from his comrades on the battlefield, comrades who have shared life and death with him there. At this point, Nolan Shan has reached the 3rd level of World Master. Luofeng never expected there would still be someone willing to serve as a human shield for such a cunning individual, unaware of his true nature. At that time, even though Luofeng's ship was in stealth mode, the commander of the human race forces involved in the battle requested assistance from Luofeng, who successfully detected Luofeng's ship. Babata was certain that the war commander must have obtained Luofeng's location from the virtual company alliance system. Since the battle seemed intriguing, Luofeng eventually agreed to join the fight and assist the human warriors who were in dire straits. In the midst of the battle, Nolan Shan, who was no longer strong enough to fight against his powerful enemies, pretended to be wounded. Meanwhile, his two comrades continued to advance, even though they were also wounded. When his two comrades went off to battle, Nolan Shan instead planned to flee the area, as surviving was his top priority. As for his comrades who were willing to sacrifice themselves for him, he believed such a relationship could be rebuilt later as long as he was still alive. Nolan was truly shameless, guys. Amidst the rampage unleashed by the time-space beast, which was spewing laser attacks to defeat many human warriors, the commander asked his troops to hold their ground because reinforcements would arrive shortly. The commander believed that the reinforcements were extremely powerful. However, when Luofeng appeared alone in the sky, the commander's fighting spirit immediately collapsed. It turned out that the reinforcements were only World Master level warriors, and to make matters worse, they had come alone. Earlier, the commander's communication device had been unable to detect Luofeng's ship, leading him to believe the person was a super powerful master. But it turned out to be just a world master. However, don't underestimate him. He's the main character destined to win from the start. When Luofeng entered the battle, his voice echoed through the air, attracting the attention of the time-space beast. Without wasting any time, Luofeng immediately used the first form of the Beast God armament, called Beast God Descent. The impact of the Beast God Descends technique exerted such strong pressure that even the immortal level warriors involved in the battle were affected. The pressure caused them to kneel on the ground. Even for the World Master warriors there, lifting a single finger was no easy feat. However, among all the demon races there, only the time-space beast, which could manipulate the laws of space and time, was able to withstand the pressure. It appeared that the monster could move its body, albeit with considerable effort, and even attempted to target its attack at Luofeng. Seeing the powerful enemy approaching him, Luofeng grinned as if he had been waiting for this moment. When the two domains collided, Luofeng expanded his domain to devour the enemy's power, sending it toward the inner world projection of the golden-horned behemoth. Without hesitation, as the enemy entered the projection, Luofeng unleashed the sky-tearing claw technique, tearing the time-space beast's body to shreds with a single strike. When one of the enemy dragon's heads fell to the ground, the human warriors began to question who exactly that World Master was. The power he had just demonstrated should have been nearly on par with that of an immortal of the king level, so strong and so terrifying. Fortunately, he was an ally of the human race. However, the battle was far from over. The time-space beast, whose body had been split into several parts, reunited and recovered as if nothing had happened. In the distance, behind the rock he was hiding behind, Nolan Shan thought that if only he could establish a relationship with that powerful world master, he would no longer have to fear Luofeng in the future. But Nolan Shan was stunned when he looked more clearly and realized that the powerful world master who had appeared and given him help was actually Luofeng. Well, what a tragic fate for Nolan Shan, guys. In fact, for the past 4,000 years, Nolan Shan had entered the extraterritorial battlefield to avoid Luofeng. And now, not only had he encountered him, but Luofeng, who had discovered his whereabouts, had also become extremely powerful. Nolan Shan was certain that Luofeng intended to kill him. But despite feeling extremely frightened, Nolan wouldn't back down, let alone hide. This military regulation prohibited human warriors from killing their comrades while on the extraterritorial battlefield. Staying within the military and under everyone's watchful eye was the only way Nolan believed he could survive, as Luofeng wouldn't be able to touch him. Luofeng was also aware of that rule. But every rule has its loopholes, and he would find them. When Luofeng was fighting the time-space beast, the enemy fired a laser blast, and Luofeng deflected the attack using a spatial crack from the sky-tearing claw technique. Realizing that the bursts could bounce in other directions, Luofeng immediately came up with a plan to deal with Nolan. In another corner, Nolan, who had been hiding, reappeared to fight, while Luofeng, who had already locked onto Nolan Shan's position, deflected the enemy's laser bursts, which were specifically aimed at his old enemy. And sure enough, Nolan Shan's fate was truly tragic. He had to die, and his body was left in pieces after being struck by the time-space beast's attack, which had been deflected through the beast god armament's shield. Following the incident, Nolan Shan's comrades would certainly not blame Luofeng, who was trying to defend himself against the enemy's attack. The battle continued. Still fighting the time-space beast, Luofeng once again tore his enemy into several pieces, but his enemy was able to recover quickly. In his subsequent attack, Luofeng deployed the star-eating plant, shattering the time-space beast's body until it was completely destroyed, devouring its life core, and rendering the monster unable to regenerate or live again as before. Not only that, but Luofeng also took the opportunity to wipe out the remaining demon race using his star-eating plant. Amidst the unfavorable situation for the human race, the plant appeared and began to entangle the demon race, leading the humans to victory. What mattered most to Luofeng at that moment was the chaos of the ongoing battle. In fact, no one even noticed Nolan Shan's death, let alone the fact that Luofeng had become the MVP of the battle. After the battle ended, the two commanders paid their respects to Luofeng, clearly showing their admiration. Their names were Bo Yazhu and Xu Fan, both commanders of Legion 02651 on the 7th battlefield. From those two commanders, Luofeng finally obtained information that within the Yanji continent, there was said to be a treasure left behind by the ancient indigenous people of that continent in the past. And that was the reason why warriors from various races were trying to come to that place. Meanwhile, on Misty Sand Island, where Luofeng had landed, there were 12 of the strongest beings holding positions of power, known as the 12 Marquis. Luofeng must defeat them first to have a higher chance of competing for the treasure, which is said to still be a mystery. Long story short, 100 years have passed. Luofeng fought for his life against warriors from various different races, time and time again. Because Luofeng often used the star-eating plant at his powerful immortal level, he gradually became known, and his presence began to be feared by the foreign races on Misty Sand Island. Not to forget, Luofeng honed his combat skills. Now, he can combine the power of the Beast God with the 7 Shadow Blade sword technique. After perfecting it, he created the ultimate technique known as the 7 Absolute Blade. While Luofeng was training with Behemoth's clone, who was already wearing silver armor, Babata suddenly reported that 9 billion kilometers away from their current location in a remote mountainous area, there was a group of immortals from an enemy race affiliated with the insect race. It was known that they were currently facing off against the human race. And as it turned out, the humans involved in the battle were being defeated quite badly. After the battle, one of the humans who survived even knelt down and surrendered his treasures to the enemy, just to survive. The enemy group consisted of 12 immortals, a combination of the Crystal race and the Kawu race. Luofeng thought, these guys might be the perfect test subjects for my new techniques. It was seen that the Kawu clan, who had bodies made of metal and stone, were playing with one of the human warriors who begged for mercy. The clan was so cruel that the human was crushed by their power and died inside a super heavy black rock. They laughed after seeing the human begging for mercy, And in the end, he was killed too. A warrior from the Crystal Clan interrupted, telling the stones not to be too arrogant. If they were to encounter the World Master Star Devourer, they would be doomed. The World Master Star Devourer is the title given to Luofeng, a figure who began his activities 100 years ago. It is said that his power is on par with the 12 Marquises of Misty Sand Island. Not long after, Luofeng's voice suddenly echoed behind the mist billowing in the air. He said, rather than talking nonsense from behind, they should just fight head-on. The impact of Luofeng's power destroyed the mountain wall behind the enemy. This time, the enemy finally realized the presence of the World Master Star Devourer. Seeing this, the warriors from the Crystal Clan immediately paid their respects to Luofeng and said that they did not want to be enemies with him, asking him to leave. Of course, Luofeng would not let them go, especially since they were under the insect race faction. It was said that the Crystal Clan were creatures skilled at reshaping their bodies. Meanwhile, the Kawu clan, whose bodies were made of metal and stone, had extremely strong defenses. Among the insect race's subordinates, they were considered one of the best races or clans, posing a great threat to the human race that must be eliminated. The stones are indeed quite arrogant, but Luofeng, who appeared alone before the group of immortals, is no less arrogant. So, who will emerge victorious among these arrogant individuals? Luofeng's understanding of the beast god's power has grown deeper. Previously, only a flash of light was visible, but now the beast god's form is beginning to take shape. The immortals on the enemy's side can now be easily drawn into Luofeng's inner world projection. Meanwhile, the enemies devoured within the projection launched various attacks, attempting to shatter the inner world projection created by Luofeng and find a way out. However, they were instead devoured by the beast god. Despite being merely a projection, the beast god's power proved to be incredibly strong. "It's already over? It barely even started. How boring," said Luofeng. So what happens next? Alright, thank you for watching until the end. And don't forget to support this channel with likes, subscribe, and comments. That's all from me. Bye.